Hey, I'm Chris Gilchrist. I get to serve as the executive pastor here at Stonebridge Church in the Woodlands. Welcome to Sunday Continued. This is where we keep the conversation going after Sunday, asking the questions we didn't get to, talking through what this actually looks like in real life, and figuring out how to live it out during the week. If you're new to Stonebridge or just exploring, we're so glad that you're here. Our heart is simple. It's to lead people to a real, healthy, and growing relationship with Jesus Christ. And if you're local to the Woodlands or Magnolia, we'd love to meet you sometime. We gather every Sunday at 9:30 and 11:05. Now let's dive in. All right, so we're back at it again, man.
Here we are, man. You and me.
Tales all this time. So this past week, Brian, you were talking a lot about Acts 8, obviously, but I was thinking this, and I was thinking about my sermon last week and then yours this past week, that you and I both used this term, the gospel, a bunch of times. And I think the mistake that I can run into is that I'll use that word and just assume that everyone in the crowd knows what I mean by the gospel. And so, man, my first question to you, Brian, is just, can you give just your cleanest definition of when we use the term the gospel from stage, what that even means?
Yeah, so obviously it's good to the immediate kind of translation of that is good news. So it's really like it's kind of like a report of something that happened. And so that's what I love about the idea of the gospel. It's not like a philosophy. It's not just like some newest idea that we've come up with in our think tank, but it's really just simply reporting this miraculous thing that happened. And really it's about the events of Jesus. It's that he came, he was crucified, and then on the third day, on that Sunday, he was not in the grave anymore.
Yeah.
And he appeared, and I love 1 Corinthians 15, really, to me, is like the cleanest version of that, where it just says, this is the good news that we have witnessed and is continued to be handed down, that Jesus did these things, and then he appeared to the apostles, and then 500 witnesses saw him. And so it's really, in Acts, I think Acts 4, it talks about how the apostles are like, we can't stop speaking about what we've seen and what we've heard. So it's really just, that idea that you're a witness to that Jesus walked out of the grave, which verifies what he did.
Yeah. So, I think that's been one of the really cool themes, now that we're 8 chapters into Acts, of this continual one thing that continues to be part of the story, which is they're so overwhelmed by the good news of Jesus that they can't stop telling people about it. And you see that even in Acts 8 with the continuation of the story with another new guy kind of on the scene that we had not met before in Philip. And I think, I think what you talked about this past week of the concept of scattered, that you and I, that we're scattered into our worlds and we're scattered into these different places of, things that we had not planned. Where did you kind of like come up with, like when you were reading that passage, like why did you like the idea of scattered, and what was kind of your thought process with that?
Yeah. It made me just think that these are people that they didn't sign up to go somewhere different. Like you think about, I'm gonna step out and pray about going out and being a missionary, and I'm gonna be commissioned, and then I'm gonna sign up to go on this go somewhere else. And it was like something that it happened because of this resistance, this persecution, and I mean they just witnessed the first person get killed for the gospel, for the good news they were speaking about. And so I think it really hit me that on a very logical level, you could kind of think, man, this is such a major inconvenience, having to uproot from where they had lived and their community and having to kind of run for their life, not knowing that, more people are going to come chase them down and do what they did to Stephen. And so it's kind of like, I could see how you could be fearful, you could go in hiding. Maybe you could say, maybe we shouldn't talk about Jesus anymore. Maybe, or maybe just have a really bad attitude that, you're being forced to leave everything you've ever known. And so I think, just that those two ideas together of like, they were scattered because of people attacking them and chasing them out, but it just cause them to want to share about Jesus that much more.
Yeah.
Which was challenging to me.
No, and I mean, you said it in your sermon that even before that you'd been told that you're preaching on Acts 8, that you'd been thinking more just about, you talked about the story with Samuel's person down at the University of Florida.
Yeah.
What do you think, I don't know, why do you think that that's been something bubbling up in you just recently? Because you didn't know that you're going to be talking about Acts 8. We never know with Steve's sermon schedule, where we're going to line up perfectly.
True.
And so
Fair point.
Why do you feel like that's something that has been bubbling up in you in general?
Yeah. I think it's more of, I'm kind of, I guess, sharing more of kind of what God's doing in my own life through that a little bit. I wish I could say that there's hundreds of people that have been saved and heard and received the gospel because of this place I've been scattered to, but I feel like it's more of God opening up my eyes a little bit to the opportunity. I think that, to me, just the visits to the hospital and these medical appointments, I just feel like at first I was just kind of, oh man, we got to do all this stuff, and definitely wasn't planning on this. And it is a big commitment of your time and your resources. And, I think just more recently, I think God's opening my eyes to, look, this is where I am. And I've, in a sense, been scattered here, and it wasn't something I signed up for, but I am connecting with people I never would have met before. And so, just like the early church, I mean, they hadn't planned to move to Samaria. They hadn't planned to move to
they definitely
southern
did not
Judah.
want to. Yeah.
No, that was definitely not in their plans, but all of a sudden, they now have opportunity to share their Jesus stories with people that never, ever would have heard of it any other way, And so I just kind of embracing, God's ways are higher than mine. And I am a person like most of us that gravitates towards what I'm comfortable with.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And so getting out of my comfort zone, having to show up at new places, but being able to try to pray into those situations and even if it's just small ways, I think for me, it's just the first step is just noticing this is more than just a doctor's appointment. God, help me to see that there are people around me that you created for a relationship with you. And so maybe it's just by me showing kindness to them today, or it doesn't have to be some major thing.
No, yeah.
Or maybe it's just me being more intentional of someone I see regularly, what if I started praying for them, praying that God will just give me an opportunity?
Yeah, I love I loved the imagery of that, because I think all of us, we have these places that we go in our day in and day out that we don't want to go to. I think, car pickup lines, whatever it might be for a normal person, of just, there's these things where in our normal rhythms of our normal days that we are around people that other people aren't going to be around. And what if I look at that through a new lens of, God, you've called me to this group of people and at this certain time, and not wasting it. And I loved kind of the challenge of that. And it reminded me, of my soccer coaching adventures, of all the different teams, like the Blueberry Monsters and
Red Marios,
Golden Pikachus. And it's one of those things too of, I love being with my kids and I love coaching their sports, but there's more to it than that for me. It's this concept of, I have the potential now to be around a group of people that I would never be around. They don't go to the same school that my kids go to. They don't go to Stonebridge necessarily. And so how can I take those moments and use that to influence the people around it? And not that everyone should coach their kids in sports. You should, because it's awesome. But if you can't, I understand. But even still, if you're on the sidelines, are you interacting with those parents for a chance to talk to them? When you are helping them out at their school clubs, when you're interacting with those other parents, what do those conversations look like? And what does that look like for you to step into them? And like you said, it doesn't have to be, I'm coming at you with my gospel presentation, here's my track for you today. But it can be as simple as just hey, how are you doing? And trying to get past a surface level moment with them.
Yeah. I think for me, it's last time we talked on a podcast,
wow.
It was, some of my first experiences with sharing the gospel was more going up to total strangers, kind of giving the 4 spiritual laws, seeing if they were interested in talking about God. If they said no, then we moved on to the next person. If they said yes, we'd give our presentation. And sometimes they might be open to it, sometimes not. But I think where God's growing me lately through some of these appointments, when, like the Florida thing is interesting because we're starting to see these same people over and over.
Yeah.
We're going to go back again. It's the same people. And so it's kind of like there's still, I think this lady's pretty far from God right now. But I think God's teaching me more about how to love someone, pray for somebody, be committed to the journey of, walking alongside of them for ever how long it takes for them to be more open to God than they were before.
Yeah. No, I love that, because I think, we can think of it as just like the conversion happens in that one-time moment, and it does in one sense, but there's all this background that goes into it, and all these other conversations, and all these other prayers, and all these other moments of getting to that point. And, I'm praying, obviously, that you will be the person to lead her to Jesus, but I'm also more so just praying that somebody would be that person for her. Yeah. And I think, that's such a different mindset. I think, for me, one of the biggest things that I'm always challenged up with this is, am I just slowing down enough? Am I just listening well enough to hear for those little moments? My wife is so much better about this. Like, she'll go up to like random people. Like, we pick up my daughter right now in the pre-K car line, and Brittany will like just go strike up a conversation with somebody that she's never met before. And like, they'll like just like pour out their soul to her. And I'm always just like dumbfounded of like, how did you do that? Like, how did you get that person to start crying in the car line? Like, I'm just trying to pick up my kids, and like, you're, off talking to someone with like in tears. And it just really, she always reminds me, it's just taking enough time to listen. And asking enough real...
She should be a counselor.
She should be. She's pretty good at it. But it really is this like small little details of like, hey, are you gonna ask real enough questions to get real enough information to then talk to people on a real level? Yeah. No, I mean, I love Dave Ferguson has a book where he talks about the bless, kind of the idea of bless, BLESS, when it's begin in prayer. I was gonna say, do you have them? Begin in prayer, and then listen, eat, serve, and then share your story. Okay. And I really like that. And, our small groups did that a couple years ago. But even that idea of listening, to me, I feel like that was the biggest part of what I was doing this last time to Florida, was just listening to this person's story, understand more about their world and what's important to them, and, maybe what their struggles are. And I think what you're describing with Brittany is like, it's powerful to listen to somebody, because I feel like the world's in such a hurry and we don't listen that great to people, but it's such a great way to show that you care about somebody. Yeah, I think it might be the biggest way in today's world that we can show someone we care about them, because it is such a lost art of slowing down and listening. Like, I always think that one of the ways that we can be seen as Christians in our context as relevant is being known as listeners, like to be known as a people that are willing to be interrupted and to slow down and to hear from somebody else, because it's so different than what the world does right now. I, in a former life, worked in the student ministry, and just even getting them off their cell phones to them to just interact together, it's getting harder and harder. And I can make fun of students, but see adults do it all the time now too. It's the struggle of, do I see people for who they are? If I walk into Samaria, if I walk into this foreign place, I still have to see them. Like, I still have to see the people around. And I think for a lot of us, are we slowing down? Are we doing these things to just see the world around us? Yeah, it's good. But you continued on. Maybe we just that's the very beginning of Acts 8. But then you continued on, and you kind of talked about this wild guy that was doing some sorcery. And tell us a little bit about, just give a little context of what was going on there. And well, I one of the families in our small group also practices sorcery. Their daughter was like, "Mom, there's like." They talked about sorcery in the Bible. Yeah, Rowan was a little confused about it too.
The kids perked up. What was that? A sorcerer? What was that?
I literally was like, my son has not gone into Harry Potter yet, but I was thankful in that moment that he had not yet, because I feel like would have only confused him.
That's all they would have thought about. They would have just about the rest of the time.
It's just a very different context in today's world.
And it has a nice ring to it. Simon the Sorcerer.
It's a pretty cool name.
It really is.
It's got some ring to it.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was, it's such a interesting part of that story. And obviously Luke, the author of Luke and Acts, wanted that included in there, for us to know about that. But I mean, as I thought about it, did a little more research into the Samaritan culture of that time, they were very much looking for a Messiah. In fact, when Jesus talked to the woman at the well a little before this story, you could tell that, she was like, but when the Messiah comes, he's going to explain all these things to us. Like, they were people that they really did feel a hunger for that deliverer to come. And they had their own kind of version of the Messiah, a different name. And so I think Simon kind of capitalized on that maybe a little bit.
Well, it's a group, too, that was so lost. I mean, you think about the people that they wanted to have kinship with, reject them completely. These other, this Jewish context that they used to be part of, but because of the choices they had made and the pagans that they had interacted with, have been cast aside. So, I mean, I think that it was even more ripe for, one, a desire of, like, we need a savior. We need someone to come save us from this feeling that we have. And then two, someone to come in and exploit that and be like, hey, I see a desperate group of people that are, I can maybe gain influence with.
Yeah. And I'm sure that felt great. I mean, he was loving the attention, and you kind of see some of that. I mean, even I think about when Paul planted the church in Ephesus, you had people that their whole livelihoods were built around, for them it was more of the worship of some of the pagan gods, but there was a lot of money to be made in that. I'm sure Simon did well for himself. I'm sure he had his patrons that were supporting him.
Okay.
And so, I mean, it's just, I love that about the Bible. You could have left that story out, but it was like, this is what happened. Yeah. Like, it was messy. There was this guy there that was claiming to be a Messiah, but the true Messiah showed up.
Yeah. It's interesting, too, because I think we can romanticize the early church a little bit, because we can go to Acts 2 and be like, look at all what the early church was about. And it was about a lot of great things, but was such a messier start than I think that we sometimes talk about. And because they're navigating all these new ideas and, essentially establishing this new way of life on the go. Yeah. And they're interacting with these people that are like, hey, how do I do this? And Simon's first instinct was, oh, here's something that I can gain influence with. And here's something that I can use to my own, power and glory, essentially.
Yeah. And it was even messier because, like, for whoever's, taking the stats that day, I mean, Simon filled out the commitment card.
He did, man.
He checked the box that he accepted Jesus. He got baptized.
I mean,
it looked like he was
as a guy that keeps the church's stats. I mean, he would have made my end of year stats.
Let's say they were at 99 and then you had Simon to get you to 100.
Right.
I mean, that sounded great, right? And so that was kind of like felt really messy. And then all of a sudden he makes an offer pulls out some money and offers to, what's it going to cost me?
Give me that power.
Give me that power, Peter. How do I do that trick that you just did there with the laying on of hands?
I would love to go back in time and just see Peter's face, like when Simon first asked him that.
That really would be. That's a moment right there.
From what we read about with Peter, he's a pretty passionate guy. So I just wouldn't imagine that he would just have this face of just of utter disgust.
If you just had unlimited, kind of visits on a time machine, that would be a great one to throw in there. Just to see that moment. It wouldn't
be a top 10, but it'd be a moment that would just be like, that would just be really
let's go
interesting.
Check that one out.
Well, it just reminds me, I think, I can make fun of this guy for misusing the gospel. But I do think that there is this temptation for all of us to go into our Christian faith and to say, what can I get out of it? What can I do for me? How do I gain influence because of this? And so, yes, it feels kind of ancient because of what he was doing, and we don't see as much of that in today's time. But I do think that there still is this element of people wanting to take the gospel and making it about themselves and making it about what they, what they want to get out of it.
Gives you a platform. I mean, you can... you can build a following and, use the gospel and Christianity to build that and get a lot of people to give you attention and praise.
And we can even get into it for the wrong, reasons of, there's these, you can get into it because you think that if I follow Jesus, that God's going to give me money and riches or all of these sorts of things. And it goes back to when we think of what the gospel is really about. The gospel is about a savior that came and died for us to set us free from the bondage of sin and to be our rescuer. But he also did it so that we would pick up our cross and follow him. And so that it goes now then for this idea that I'm not going to live my old way of life and make it about what Chris wants to do, that I'm going to now do about what Jesus wants to do. And that's the part that Simon completely missed in the telling of the gospel to him, is that he was like, okay, I'm cool with this like guy doing these things, but I have to like give up my old way of life and follow somebody and live for their life. He clearly missed that on his, checking of boxes.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a friend of mine who, one of the things he says is that, we all want to be somebody special.
Of course.
There's that part of our humanity that it feels so good that for people to be talking about us, for us to get a lot of likes, for us to get a lot of views on something we put, whatever it is, like we just crave that, to feel important, to feel like we matter. And so, it's a difficult thing to, how do you let the gospel, how do you let what Jesus did transform that part of our humanity? Again, I think about baptism as that idea of I am dying to that old way of life of it has to be all about me and I have to be my own God. And I'm actually finding that my true purpose is being joined into who Jesus is, being welcomed into God's family. And now I get to, and I find that it's so much more satisfying to live a life that's putting the spotlight on him.
Yeah.
And it's how I'm made.
Well, when we try to be our own little gods, like that's when things usually go awry for us.
Yeah.
When I try to make my life about me and I become the center and I become the focus, that's usually when I'm at my most unhappy, actually. And it's weird to describe to people that aren't in the Christian faith this concept, but there is this beautiful thing that happens that when I am not the center anymore and I am not the focus anymore, and I recognize that the story really isn't about me, it's about Jesus, and that I get to just be part of that story, the freedom and the peace and the joy that I experience because of it not being about me grows tenfold. And I think, it sounds crazy to an outsider because it's this concept of like, wait, so your life gets better when you make it not about you? And it's like, absolutely, my life gets better. The pressure is off.
Right. It's so hollow too. I mean, the week before last, we talked about when you had preached on Stephen's life, but you made a point about the most compelling motivator for us is, to be able to go and obey and share Jesus with others is it's an opportunity to actually know God in a more deep way.
Yeah.
And for me, I think if it's all about you, that just gets real hollow and boring really fast, because versus I want to get caught up in the infinite God, the God who made the whole universe. And it takes eternity to actually explore and know that God, right? It's so much like, it's just kind of hollow when it's like the end of my pursuit is just me.
Yeah.
Like you just kind of run out of stuff pretty quick.
I just think that you're going to be miserable.
You are.
Because you were just never made to be that.
Yeah.
Like you were never meant to be God. And, just go back to the garden, that first moment of that internal decision of, I'm going to go my own way. And how many just daily times or moments in our lives that we just make those decisions without even really thinking about it of, hey, I'm going to go my own way in this. And I'm going to do my own thing. And the beauty of the good news or the gospel or, the story of Jesus is that when you go back in path with him, you're set free and your burden is light, your yoke is easy. Like all of these things come with it. And I just think it's not about you, but man, what a great things that you get when you actually choose to follow Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing that, Brian, I think that we're going to start trying to do is just think about what we talked about this last week and just give our people just like, hey, what's one thing that we can take from last week's sermon and go and apply it in my life? And so if someone came up to you this past Sunday or maybe right now in this moment and asked you, hey, Brian, what do you want me to do with what you talked about on Sunday? What would be an encouragement that you would give?
Yeah, I think for me on this one, the title that I ended up landing on was this idea of the gospel overcomes.
I didn't actually, so I watched you online, so I never actually saw the title.
Yeah.
So it's a good title.
So, and to me, I think that was the big thing that really hit me about Acts 8 is that nothing could stop what God was doing. And so I think maybe for a personal application would be, okay, that's historically what has happened. Like,
oh yeah, you can see
they
it.
could not stop the gospel. Like, these religious leaders are like, just quit talking about it. We'll let you go. Just stop talking about Jesus. Well, yeah, that didn't work out. 2,000 years later, over 1 billion people, right? And so historically that has happened, but I think, I'd put some reflective questions in there for the message, and I just want people to take time to, what does that mean for you? Like, how has Jesus, what he has done, overcome whatever barriers you might feel you have? Maybe it is a barrier of your pride that you just want him to overcome, where you do think, wow, maybe, I'm going to be happiest when it's about me. Are you sure? Right? Because we just talked about, like, that is actually going to run its course really fast, and you're going to be very unhappy with that pursuit if you just try to make it about you. Or maybe it is, like with the Ethiopian eunuch in the last part of the story, maybe you feel like, I'm just too confused. I just have too many questions. For maybe it's like you need to allow Jesus to show you he can overcome those. And maybe part of that prayer is that he would send someone like Philip into your life, and he often does that. He's done that many times with me in my own life that could help guide you and help, maybe it's found getting connected in community or whatever that is. And so I think just not just letting it be a historical fact, but, Steve often says that nothing is really powerful until it's personal. And so that would be my challenge. Spend some time really praying, God, show me how Jesus, your reality, what you've done, how it can overcome whatever that barrier I feel right now in my life. Like, let Jesus overcome that for you.
Well, I think for all of us that there's these things in our life that shield's not the right word, but that we keep from the gospel interacting with. I think whether it's past hurt or shame or successes that I don't want, whatever it might be, that there's these things that we like essentially tell God, like, hey, you can have this 90% concept of who I am, but this 10% I'm going to shield up and not going to let the gospel confront. And I think that's a great challenge of, like, what are the parts of me that I haven't let Jesus deal with? And what are the things that I've kept from him or not wanted to allow the gospel to transform my life on the good and negative sides of them? Because I think there's both, but I think that's a great challenge to just look at and say, hey, where can the gospel come into my life? And what are the parts that I have been keeping from Jesus in all of this?
Yeah.